Hi, I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story. Remember when you wrote that ideal line of intro copy or delivered that perfect sales pitch and you got your audience leaning in with anticipation of what was to come next? Imagine doing that every single time you communicate a sales message. But it seems impossible, doesn't it? What if instead of impossible, you made it probable? What if you discovered 3 secret steps that will transform you from the occasional success you experience by winging it with your intuitive storyteller into winning your customers over with an intentional step-by-step narrative framework? Well, you know me by now. I'm talking about the time-tested ABT, the and, but, therefore messaging dynamo. That, when done right, will hook the subconscious limbic system of your prospect, where all of their real buying decisions are being made. When you realize that the ABT is a better way to sell because it uses the story structure of setup, problem, and resolution, which that resolution is your solution. It works because it's the only story structure our human brain seeks out to create meaning in our world. When you understand all this, then you will be wishing you had this secret selling technique years ago. Well, you can have it now in my new online course, The ABTs of Selling. You will learn the complete process of the ABT in under 18 minutes through 3 brief videos that will have you applying this messaging marvel in seconds. So take the next step of using the ABT to connect with your customer every single time by enrolling at businessofstory.thinkific.com. But only if you're serious about exceeding your sales projections, because the ABT takes practice, lots of practice. Therefore, enroll in your course now, the ABTs of Selling, at businessofstory.thinkific.com. Stop winging it with your sales messaging and start winning over lifelong customers. Today, I'm excited to have on our show for you, Zach Phillips, the Director of Professional Development for the National Association of Music Merchants, or NAMM. You'll learn how NAMM survived COVID intact and how some of its members improvise to keep their businesses and music alive and thriving in the communities they serve.
When your business is suddenly challenged with a black swan, the likes of which we'd never seen before, he said that you will be remembered by how you served your customers during the pandemic, meaning companies that approached their customers with a service-first mindset during a challenging time would be remembered favorably when the clouds passed. And I think it was important for businesses to also tell that story to their customers and make sure they were living those values and walking that talk.
Founded in 1901, NAMM's mission is to strengthen the music products industry and promote the pleasures and benefits of making music. The NAMM Resource Center covers innovative creations, the evolution of music, sound, and entertainment products, the ever-changing world of music retail, as well as the members' collective quest to improve music education around the globe. Its oral history program and music history project podcast features stories of those who have helped shape and expand the music industry through the years. Zach joined NAMM in 2012 as Director of Professional Development. He oversees NAMM's educational programs for the music products, sound, and entertainment technology industries, including NAMM U and NAMM U Online. He previously served 13 years as editor of Music Inc. and Upbeat Daily magazines, and as a part-time singer-songwriter. In fact, just last year, he released his latest album, The Wine of Youth. Please welcome to the Business of Story, Zach Phillips. Zach, welcome to the show, man.
Park, I am thrilled to be here. I'm honored. Thank you.
This is great. You know, you and I were talking the other day, and I mentioned I've been doing this series on musicians and business and brand and sales storytelling and what we can learn from musicians and so forth. And then you and I were talking about the professional development you do there at NAMM. National Association of Music Merchandisers. And it just occurred to me, let's get a business mind in here now on the music front and just talk about everything from what you've seen happen at Namm through COVID, how you're coming out of it, and how brand and sales storytelling has had a part in that. So you
Yeah.
ready to roll?
No time like the present.
Well, first, you are a musician. Tell me about the kind of music you play, what instrument, and your garage recording setup there. I'm very
Sure.
intrigued by that.
Like a lot of people in our industry, I'm kind of first and foremost a singer-songwriter and a hack guitarist. In fact, um, one of the if you go to an industry event, by the way, the first question you're going to get asked, you know what it is? What instrument do you play? Sometimes before, what business are you from, or what part of the country are you from? So it's part and parcel of being in the industry. I just put out an album, actually, my first one in a while, called "The Wine of Youth." It's I don't have a lot of time for this. My reason for being is to serve the music products and sound industry, but it was a weekends project. We'll put it that way, and that was actually recorded at a friend's studio. But I won't shy away from doing some garage band demos here and there, like so many modern musicians these days. Amazing what you can get on a laptop in terms of
And you
recording
you
gear.
wrote all the songs, did all the vocals, the lyrics, the whole thing?
That's right. Yeah.
That's
It's,
impressive. What kind of music do you perform? And of course, are you going to supply audio file for me so that we can put it in the show somewhere?
if you'll have me, absolutely happy to do that. That'd be great, Park. My particular style is I'd describe it as kind of classic Americana or roots rock. It's a little bit more atmospheric and has a little bit more of a chamber pop or baroque pop edge than a lot of straight Americana. But that's the style. It's I guess in all that falls within that: folk rock, country, indie country. There's the million verticals within every musical genre.
Well, where did you grow up and when did you find your interest and love for music?
I grew up in New Jersey, moved to Chicago when I was 10. Grew up in a family that wasn't necessarily musical or unmusical. My dad played a little classical guitar. He's actually back at it now since he retired. But my brother's the one who introduced me to music. And funny enough, in the music products industry that I serve, school band programs and school orchestra programs are something that we consider incredibly coveted for the way that they introduce young people to music as part of a school curriculum. It's something Namm's very involved in, advocating for music education. And I was a child of that, so I kind of owe much of my career, in fact, to that.
And so when did you start playing the guitar?
I think that was when I was about 12. That was when I was about 12, and beat on my dad's old guitar until I could beg and beg and beg my parents to get me an electric. So not an uncommon story. My public service announcement, by the way, for parents. My parents got it. Finally. If a kid asks to play guitar and wants an electric guitar, don't start him on acoustic. Just get him that electric guitar. It'll give him an outlet other than video games. Video games are fantastic, but music's great too.
The electric guitar as an entryway into all the wonderful things
Yeah,
that music can do for a kid.
that's right.
Yeah, I
That's right.
started, when I was a little kid and I watched my grandma Mabel bouncing across the piano and I said, I want to be able to do that. My mom, dad got me a old Kimball. Well, it's old now, a brand new Kimball, but never played very well. Little Spinet,
Yeah, of
and
course.
started practicing playing the third grade. And I started writing songs in the third grade. I mean, it was just like, I don't know why. It just started coming out of me. And I still have some of those really funny little scribbled songs that I wrote back then. And yeah, I just kind of came up through it. And I was, to your point about music education, in high school, junior high, and whatever, it had such a major impact on my life because you may be able to tell by my voice, and not the purest singer in any way, shape, or form. I'm probably on the other end of that spectrum.
Just say you have a
And
voice
I
for
was
radio,
in,
Park. Are you kidding me?
I've got a face for radio as well, by the way. Uh, and I went in, and there was one teacher, Dennis Barron's at Bothell High School, that I went in as a sophomore and I auditioned for the choir just because I loved music. And that was about the only music program that was available to me at the time. And I went in and I had to sing solo to him. And I just sounded horrible, my squeaky, froggy voice. And he goes, "You have a magnificent voice," which I know he was completely pulling my leg. "And we would love to have you in the choir." And that was like one of my most proudest moments. And I
Fantastic.
still see him occasionally and I say, "You are the teacher that had the greatest impact in my young life." And so I
Wow.
know what you mean about advocating for those programs.
Creativity in 21st century workplace. Um, Creativity's, probably the most underrated skill we can have, and there's a whole subset of skills that fall under that, even in terms of being adaptable and nimble and so forth. So there's a lot that's happening when we're making music in terms of what the brain is doing. So we're
Problem
both lucky.
solving,
Problem solving.
improvising, all of that. Well, Zach, did you ever have a time that you were really pushing to be a professional musician and getting out there on the road and doing your thing?
Yeah, I did a little bit. I never got out on the road, but when I was younger and in my 20s, I pushed pretty hard. I had a wonderful group of musicians that I played with called the Walk-ins. We had a band up until probably my late 20s, and I sort of stepped aside from it until the last couple years, just because there was, like we all know, that life catches up with you and you have things you need to do. And more recently, I was just inspired to pick it up again in the last few years. So it's funny we're having this conversation. It's timely. I'm first and foremost an association and trade show professional, but I kind of think of myself as, music is once again part of my lifestyle, which is strange, but it's good that I sort of feel as if I'm eating my own cooking now, and that's good.
Well, you're practicing what you preach out there. How do you get inspiration and even story subject matter for the songs that you write?
Oh, that is the ultimate question. My process is not unlike a lot of songwriters, but it's not, I couldn't write an instruction manual on it. The most important thing I think a creative person can do, especially a writer, I mean, you know this, to some extent, is to take a deep breath, try to kind of, the word, subjugate your mind and allow your subconscious to work, and then edit later. So the most important thing for me is just to close my eyes and do what I feel like doing at that moment. It's amazing as a lyricist, what kind of wordplay happens when you do that too. And the combinations of words that might not make literal sense on the page, but, are really an interesting expression of language. There's a great Stephen King line: write with the door closed, edit with the door open. And that's how I tend to write songs.
How many albums have you done? It sounded like you said you just released another album.
Yeah, I've made 3 albums. I sort of feel as if this is my first one it's the first one that I think I truly feel good about. So we'll see. I'm going to keep working on it when I have time. As I mentioned, my reason for being first and foremost is to serve the industry. So this is just a fun early middle-aged diversion. We'll put it that way.
Well, let's talk about the work you do at Namm. So, how long have you been there? And have you always been in the professional development realm?
No, great question. I started my career. Had an internship at an association for long-term care facilities when I was in college, and then started as the assistant editor at a trade magazine. Worked there until I became editor and did that for 13 years. Actually left that magazine to come to Namm little over 8.5 years ago, in fact. So, in a sense, it's funny. I was going to be a history teacher, and I realized recently, in fact, preparing for this podcast, I was thinking about it. I kind of came full circle in a sense with this position because I ended up using my interest in and background in education, wanted to be a history teacher, journalism and media, and research and history. So I came into this position primarily because the magazine I edited was in some ways it was kind of the idea book in the industry. We reported on news, of course, and had feature stories and profiles on retailers and manufacturers, but we were very focused on better business education and new ideas. And that's exactly what we do at Namm with the education programs, whether it's for music retail and brands, whether it's for pro audio professionals, whether it's for entertainment technology professionals. Very focused on new ideas and best practices.
So 8 years ago, did it kind of feel like the universe was coming together in all of your distinct interests in music and content creation and history to like provide this ideal job for you?
Yeah, absolutely, Park. It's funny. A young professional who I really respect asked me recently for career advice, and I was kind of dumbfounded because I've just gotten lucky in terms of doors opening, you know, call it whatever we will, the universe providing or just me recognizing an opportunity. But, I got really lucky where certain doors opened at the right time that were compatible with my skills. So I really wanted to help this young man, and I just didn't have anything for him beyond you know, continue to focus on what you really like to do and be open minded, because sometimes it just perfect career takes on a different form than what you originally think it's going to be, but it's actually in essence what you wanted to do anyway.
Yeah, I know it sounds trite when people say just follow your passion, follow your curiosity, but it couldn't be more true. You know, a lot of times when you're following your passion, it doesn't always make a lot of rational sense
Right.
to you or especially to mom and dad or anybody else.
That's so
Yet
true.
when you do, as you know, old Joseph Campbell says in The Hero's Journey, when you follow your bliss, doors will open where there were only walls before. And I can attest to that. So you find yourself here. Can you describe what it is exactly you do there and for whom?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. NAM, as you mentioned, stands for the National Association of Music Merchants. We've been around, I think, for 120 years. Originally began as an association for the piano industry, and in a sense, our name is a misnomer because, in fact, we're a global organization now, and we represent everyone in the music products, sound, and entertainment technology industry, retailers, brands that would include distributors and manufacturers. There are even some key industry communities that aren't necessarily members, but also come to our show because they're very important to the industry. I mean, lighting designers, live sound engineers, recording engineers, the list goes on. Music students and college music students and music educators. So, we sort of see ourselves. My colleague has said, anything in the signal chain that you see on a stage, for instance, we represent all of that. And NAM does a lot of different things. Of course, we advocate for music education. We have a lot of membership features. We provide education, my department. But what we're most known for is the Namm Show, which occurs every January in Anaheim. And it's kind of a pilgrimage for people globally in the music products industry. It's a trade event. In January of 2020, when we were last able to host it pre-COVID, I think it attracted about 115,000 registrants. It's a trade event, but it feels a lot like almost like a big celebration. Somebody said, "What's the NAMM show like?" I said, "Well, it's a trade show that feels like Comic-Con for the musical instrument industry." It has a real vitality and buzz that's, I think, representative of the just passion in our industry. And man,
You make me
what a cliche to say an industry is full of passion. I'll go on the record and say there's more passion at that show than any place on earth.
So it literally goes from any small little mom and pop
You've got
music
it.
store
Yep.
on Main Street, USA, up to the
Guitar
big
Center and Amazon,
manufacturers.
Amazon,
Yeah.
Guitar Center, Walmart, all the way down to those wonderful, wonderful independent retailers and lesson operations that we all frequent too. So it's all points in between, and the manufacturers as well.
And the instrument manufacturers.
Hmm.
So, well, let's talk a little bit about COVID. You
Yeah.
guys came through it, fairly healthy
Mm.
considering all. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact 2020 had on your industry, and what were some of the highs? I mean, what did you see people doing to get through it and were successful? And of course, what were some of the lows that really,
Mm.
your members took it on the chin?
Credit where it's due to our president and CEO Joe Lamont. He had the vision to pull us through this, along with our board of directors and executive committee. Wow, talk about having Winston Churchill wasn't born wanting to be Winston Churchill, but sometimes you become the wartime president. And man, talk about a time that everybody had to be a leader. Funny enough, we hit some big highs during COVID, but I think they were born of really low lows. The biggest low was that we couldn't host the Namm Show in January due to COVID. And I believe it was the first time since World War II that we were unable to host that show. Now, Park, most of us at Namm grew up in the industry. We're children of the industry. We care about the industry in that show. That was really tough. That was tough as an association. That was tough as a business. And of course, it was tough personally. The largest gathering in our industry. It's a pilgrimage. It's Mecca. Here's the upside.
How many people do you typically have at that?
115,000 registrants, between 100 to 116,000 registrants. Yeah. Funny enough, I was thinking about this. There was an interesting upside. That void of the not having, where we didn't have a show, we were unable to produce the show in the interest of the health and safety of our members and the industry, kind of gave us this big opportunity to do the right thing and stay connected to our membership when they needed it most. So when we made that just incredibly difficult decision to cancel the Namm Show, I think it was in late July, we still needed to provide a platform for the industry to gather. We decided we had to do that, and out of that came Believe in Music, which I think was a really powerful virtual event. It wasn't the Namm Show. You know, you can't compete with an event of that magnitude and with that kind of vibrancy, but it was an incredibly strong virtual event, in my opinion. And, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the team I work with that we were able to forgive the COVID term, pivot, and pull that off in 5 months. It was free to everyone. It was kind of our gift to the industry during a tough time. It had some exclusive features that were only for our membership. I think it had excellent programming in terms of events and education. I think it had some brilliant new product introductions. It had this cool thing called Believe in Music TV with an anchor desk and primetime programming. And the bottom line is our industry was able to connect and gather and do business when it would be so easy for all of us to feel disconnected. Strangely enough, I don't know that I've ever gotten more nice notes from our members or NAM staff, and board members have gotten more nice notes from our members than after hosting that event. And they all essentially said, look, we feel for you guys. We missed the show too. We know you couldn't host it, but look what you're willing to do for us. So that was a high of COVID. We went into this just proverbial war together as an industry, and we're all closer for it now. That said, I love virtual events, but I'm really looking forward to getting back to hosting live events. We're working on Summer NAMM in Nashville right now. It'll be a different show than previous Summer NAMMs. It'll be a little bit more focused and more intimate because, of course, we have to consider health and safety guidelines. Man, it feels really good to be putting that together.
How about your membership? You and I were talking the other day, and you saw some interesting trends in the music industry because of COVID, maybe some things that surprised you. So can we talk a little bit about, number one, let's go to the low part. What were the things where the industry really took a hit because of COVID?
Great question. It's funny, Park. I think there actually, you and I had talked about that, and I reflected on it later. And I think there were two overarching trends that emerged due to COVID. One of them was positive. The other, well, is it positive? Is it negative? I guess it just depends on when we ask the question. 10 years from now, maybe it'll all be positive. But there were two trends. One was a general sales trend. And by that, I mean certain segments of the industry had an unexpected surge in business. Certain segments had an unexpected dip in business. In terms of the highs, suddenly more people were working from home. They no longer had a commute. They may have gained a half hour to 2 hours a day. They weren't taking vacations. And based off of what we've seen and observed, it looks as if many of them use that time to get back to playing a musical instrument. That's exciting. I mean, for the first time since I've been in the industry, and I think even some of the senior NAMM team members have been in the industry, because we just talked about this, we realized there was a supply issue in the guitar business. There were a bunch of major manufacturers in their retail base that couldn't keep guitars in stock. First time I've ever seen that. There's a lot of new business in digital pianos and keyboards. I think all indicators suggest that home recording had a good year. I mean, you can imagine there was a lot of business for new audio interfaces for virtual meetings. tough to say how those trends will continue, or if they'll continue, or if they were inspired by, many of them may have been somewhat inspired by stimulus checks, but we saw it. Now, on the flip side, you asked about sort of the tough part of it. Some segments were unfortunately hit hard. It was a tough time to be in the live sound business. Concerts and live events shut down. You can bet that impacted sales of everything from loudspeakers to mixers, um, school music, which we talked about. In some ways, kind of the beating heart at the center of the industry, which has so long been one of the steadiest segments of the industry. It had a tough year because COVID impacted school band and orchestra programs, and that cut into business for a lot of companies. So COVID had this unexpected impact on sales of certain instrument categories. That's really the first trend. My long explanation for it. Second trend relates to the way people do business. I heard a friend in the industry say a couple months ago. He said the industry essentially leapt forward by 10 years in 10 months, and we're now in 2030. And it's one of those bold statements that you reflect on and think, well, there is some truth in that. Just looking at retail, it's amazing to see how business has evolved in just 1 year. I think everyone got better at meeting their customers where they're at. Suddenly we saw more businesses embracing the concept of omni-channel retailing. It's one of those buzzwords you hear, but really offering customers just this much more seamless, frictionless experience across all channels. For example, retailers, I think, improved their websites and e-commerce capabilities. Suddenly, retailers were doing business with customers on Zoom at 10:30 at night. Curbside pickup, which we've been talking about for a long time, became commonplace. Retailers who offered in-store music lesson programs suddenly introduced a virtual lesson option for students as well. So there was also a shift in the way many companies did business, and I think an acceleration of certain business trends. I think we got better at meeting our customers where they're at. Powerful.
I love that line. We accelerated by 10 years in 10
10
months.
months.
What
Yeah.
was the one biggest, most surprising trend to you?
We have a supply issue in the guitar business. As popular as the guitar has been, we just didn't predict that happening. And mind you, I mean, guitars are still a massive segment of the industry, but we didn't see it coming. 4 years ago, you may remember there was a popular article in the Washington Post. I think it was called The Death of the Electric Guitar. 4 years later, a lot of businesses can't keep guitars in stock. That surprised me. I was also really pleasantly surprised to see how even the smallest businesses were industrious, and how industrious and nimble they were to adapt to this. I mean, it's so easy for people to say every retailer needs to have a robust e-commerce engine. Much easier said than done. And of course, there needs to be an online infrastructure to support that in terms of that retailer's content marketing strategy. There's so much that goes into it. Darn it if we didn't pull it off as an industry, for the most part. That's really inspiring. That surprised me. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it did.
Do you have a story out there from one of your smaller retailers, members that did something very unique or different that you just went like, wow, there's ingenuity in the face of disaster?
One retailer that I know who has a powerful, just strong music lesson operation in the darkest days of COVID and during the shutdown couldn't have any students or customers in their store. And they reinvented their stage for live streaming performances. A large stage in their store, reinvented for live performances. For years, one of the biggest issues, Park, has been parents want a high quality video of a recital. Again, much easier said than done. They want all the students' performances up on YouTube. I know a number of businesses, lesson businesses, that suddenly created these high quality, beautiful YouTube videos. Within 2 months, they changed their capability to do that. They evolved to do that in a really significant way. Those seem like small things. I don't know that those are full on innovations, but man, that's some serious iterating. And I think it speaks to the fact that a lot of these trends they were imminent, but I think everybody, necessity is the mother of invention, and it accelerated them. So I'm going to think of some more examples. I may have some a little later. I want to think about it. Those are the two that
I surprised
pop
you
up.
with that one, but
That's a
what you're
great one.
talking You're talking about these, again, mom and pop or large retailers, whatever. They're in the business of selling instruments and running their respective companies. And then all of a sudden they're thrown into, yeah, you don't get to do business like that anymore for a while. Figure it out. And so, talking about improvisation, and I'm kind of curious, going back to the beginning of our conversation, is I would imagine most of these people are musicians in the first place, and how much of that talent and all those nights and weekends and days sitting over their axe, their instrument, learning it, played into their problem solution solving ability when the earth, the world was pulled out from underneath them. They said, okay, now you have to reinvent how you give lessons, how you sell instruments. And they probably had to really go to some very uncomfortable places and learn some new talents, techniques to be able to get through it.
I never thought about the park. You're right. I mean, luckily, there was no group of people, no personality profile more prepared to handle this than a bunch of musicians. And yeah, use the word improvisers. Absolutely. It was pretty stunning what happened even between March 15th and May 15th, what people did.
How quickly they were able to turn that.
Reorganizing their showrooms, those who could have customers in, and how they handled somebody who wanted to try out a guitar, for instance, or a band instrument, and what they would then do to clean that, and systems for managing that. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah. Going forward, do you, any of your people, projecting out a couple of years, we're through COVID and we're back to normality, whatever that might look like. And now let's just take guitars, for instance. They flooded the market, couldn't keep them in stock during COVID. And now you have them gathering dust in basements and garages and whatever. Do you see or anticipate a large resale market for that sort of thing down the road? And how might that then, of course, impact the sale of new guitars a couple
Yeah.
years down the road? Or do you not even worry about that at this point and just say, let's just get through this maelstrom?
You know, I'm a type A personality, so I worry about everything. But the resale guitar market's a great market too, and if frankly, it already exists. It already exists. Now, you're right. There could be a lot of inventory on the market, but leading up to the pandemic, I mean, you look at the growth of musical products as a category on eBay, a site like Reverb, these buying and sell online buying and selling platforms. I just saw a trend. Reverb. I want to check this. Reverb is a specific to musical instruments. I want to say, what was it? They reported a 50% increase in gross merchandise sales for their first quarter. To me, that's a really interesting indicator. So that trend's been happening. Um,
And they
and
Reverb sells only used instruments.
I believe they sell all kinds of instruments. There may
Okay.
be certain.
That's, you say that's a great brand name, Reverb, for selling used instruments.
Yeah, yeah. There may be stipulations with certain brands what they do, what they can and can't sell on a third party platform. But I think it's a little bit of everything, and a lot of retailers use it to liquidate aging or maybe more obsolete inventory. Suddenly, they've got the
Yeah.
world as a marketplace for it.
Now, you guys did some pretty amazing things there at Namm when you told me that you didn't have to, the organization didn't have to let anyone go because of COVID. You were able to hold it together and
Mm.
just keep pushing on through, marshaling on through.
Yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. There was plenty of work to do, and to serve the industry the way we wanted to serve them, at the level we wanted to serve them with Believe in Music. It was all hands on deck. And again, credit where it's due. A lot of that's the vision of our board of directors and our president and CEO. And the other thing to mention, Park, is COVID's kind of made fools of all predictions. We know that, but a Namm show is a 1-year proposition in terms of planning it. So we would have already started planning the January 2022 Namm show back in like December, 13 months maybe. So we needed all hands on deck to do that. We're doing what we have to do to create a strong show for the industry. The industry deserves it.
Yeah. You said that you had been so busy that you weren't able to attend to your own music as much as you would like, and you've been able to write more songs, and you've got this album underway now. Is that a product of COVID? Did you see that happening in other places, and so it kind of triggered it in you to do the same thing?
I actually recorded the album and had it finished and ready to go. I was planning on releasing it, I think, in early April, maybe late March. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit and sort of the world stopped, and I was not going to release it. And then I decided I was having a lot of fun seeing everybody's pandemic projects on Facebook and Instagram. So I thought, what the heck? I'm going to release this. Music's inspiring. If one person gets something from this, then it was a worthwhile endeavor. Now, that being said, I think anybody working in our organizations, they've got a full-time gig for sure, and then some. But certainly, I've used the pandemic to retrench and create a little bit more too. I'm sure there'll be a follow-up to this one soon.
So, from your experience working both on the NAM organization side as well as helping with the professional development of your members and retailers and whatever, what are some of the two, three, four lessons that you are taking out
Hmm.
of what you've been through with COVID that we might use the next time we have something that completely upsets the apple cart and or makes us stronger and more resilient in a post-COVID market?
Early in the pandemic, we had a webinar, may have been 1 month into it or less. Great webinar with Bob Phibbs, the retail doctor. And, Bob's really insightful, very passionate. And he said something fascinating that I think has come to pass. And it stuck with me. And it takes an incredible amount of intestinal fortitude and bravery and courage to do this when you're, when your business is suddenly challenged with a black swan, the likes of which we'd never seen before. He said that you will be remembered by how you served your customers during the pandemic, meaning companies that approach their customers with a service first mindset during a challenging time would be remembered favorably when the clouds passed. And I think it was important for businesses to also tell that story to their customers and make sure they were living those values and walking that talk. We heard from a piano retailer who attended that webinar. A customer walked into his store, I think it was up in Canada. It was a couple of weeks after the webinar, and the customer asked for some really obscure piano specs. And the retailer said he really didn't want to give him the specs at first, but he remembered Bob's words from the webinar. He considered what was going on in the world, and he gave those plans to the customer. Fast forward a month, and the customer came back and purchased an acoustic piano because he said he appreciated this retailer helping him and being able to share that with him. And by the way, a piano is not a small ticket item. As you remember, probably your parents may remember from that Kimball.
Oh, I bought a few of them.
Good for you. That's fantastic. We were lucky to have parents who supported us with that. Man, that really sticks with me, and that's hard to do when you're worried about the bills and your payroll. I think that, just since we're talking about branding and storytelling, this goes for all time, and I don't know. This is certainly not something that emerged from COVID, but I think music products businesses are music products companies are in an industry where authenticity matters. If you're a former guitarist in a reasonably well-known band and you have a boutique guitar pedal company, you have a great story to tell. You need to make sure that's on your About Us page, and you're telling that narrative wherever and whenever it makes sense. If you're a concert pianist and you now run a piano dealership, or a DJ running a DJ shop online, you have a great story to tell. And that's an important narrative, again, because our industry, it provides built-in credibility and trust, which is really vital to making, selling, and in this case, especially marketing musical instruments. I'm thinking in terms of best practices beyond that, and this kind of relates to what I said earlier. It was inspiring to see how retailers found new ways to reach their customers. Just seeing those virtual and hybrid music lesson programs, we saw, I could get really specific with this part, but just really interesting and effective virtual events and ingenuity in terms of embracing these new ways to connect with customers online. I saw a virtual warehouse sale that worked. The same retailer did a virtual holiday sale with music and products and all kinds of fun features. And in some cases, like we're talking about virtual events, I was speaking with a retailer who's going to host a session about this at Summer Namm in Nashville in July. That even meant reaching a global customer base. There's a retailer, for instance, out of Wisconsin, very successful one, but you would think in many cases the customer base is local. They're suddenly reaching the whole world with this, and they did reach the whole world with this. And I believe they sold some products to those customers in Europe even. We saw an increase. I mentioned that trend from Reverb. I think there was an increase in retailers harnessing online third-party platforms in a smart way, eBay, Reverb. And to me, it's a telling indicator of what worked during the pandemic and the way in which we continue to see these different channels kind of how they serve different customers and where some of the opportunity is for them.
Yeah, it's interesting when you were talking about Bob, is it Phibbs?
Phibbs, Phibbs. You got to get to know Bob.
Phibbs.
You guys would
Yeah,
hit it
I would
off.
love to, because he says what you're going to be remembered by is how you serve your customer in these tough times.
Yeah.
And that just plays right to story plot, because all character is revealed in darkness.
Yeah.
It's when the good times, everybody looks great and is having a good time and smiling from ear to ear and slapping everyone on the back. But it's not until you get thrown under the bus and the universe drags you through the mud that's when your character gets revealed. And everybody, it was universal. Everybody was feeling this. So to have that empathy and understanding for your customer during this time only makes sense. But you know what? Those retailers were going through it too, and it's hard to get yourself up every morning, dust yourself off, put the smile on your face, and go out there and be in service to someone else. It's
So
just
hard.
a hard thing to do.
So especially when you're dealing with so many challenges. By the way, side note, since we're talking about Joseph Campbell, I did not know about this, but I heard somebody recently said there's a part of the hero's journey that is part of kind of completing the circle that I'd never heard. And that is, once the hero completes his or her journey in this sort of Joseph Campbell's theory, they also have to bring something back to their community of great value that didn't exist before. I'd never heard this. I thought it was
the boon. You got to bring back the boon.
Exactly. And I'm looking at that thinking, okay, these retailers who dealt with that heavy conflict arc, these manufacturers who dealt with this, in the live sound business, who dealt with that heavy conflict arc, man, again, I'm an optimist. Knock on wood, we're out of this thing in 6 months. It's going to be awesome to see what comes out in the next year or two, because there are going to be some, through this hardship, there's going to be there will be some really interesting innovations that are brought back to the music products community. I have no idea what they'll be, but looking forward to it. The boon, right?
The boon, and you brought the boon to the show today. I mean, I really enjoyed having you here, and you actually kind of pushed me back in memory lane when I first started in the advertising world, and we're talking this is mid 1980s. I was a writer and I was just trying to find my way. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I got the chance to produce a whole lot of radio commercials. In fact, I did a show on that, and show number 300, where I played 10 of my radio commercials that are now darn near 40 years old. I had so much fun doing that. But one of my clients was Allen Piano in Oregon, the local Steinway dealer here in Arizona. Lamar Roach was my customer, and he was a very tight, serious, classical guy, dressed to the nines. And we had started doing, I inherited the account, and he was doing really boring radio commercials. And I had to produce a few of those, and he complained to me why they weren't working. And I said, Lamar, they're boring. Nobody wants to hear this stuff. They're not going to buy it just because it's a Steinway. You got to, infuse it with some fun and some story. And by golly, he let me start doing some wild stuff that he would shake his head at, because he would actually come down to the recording studio and listen to make sure. He would pull the plug if he didn't like it, because he couldn't hear my concept in his head. And then when we would see it, sometimes I'd have to pull his hand off that plug and say, no, let me just finish it. Let's just see what happens. And those spots pulled well, but it was so much fun because I was able to bring my love of music to my advertising world and knock a client out of status quo and get them thinking completely differently about this. In fact, I'll run one of my spots at the very end of the
Oh, you have to
show.
do it. You have to. I want to hear this
And
now.
throw it in there.
Music. A buddy of mine in the industry. I'm going to quote him because Brian McCann at Instrumental Music. He, great retailer up in Ventura, great guy. He always says, "Never forget, we are selling enchanted objects." And I love
That
that.
is
Yeah,
so beautiful because
yeah,
sitting in that object, just like my grandmother Mabel sitting at that piano when I was a little toddler, it looked like a piece of furniture to
yeah.
me. Then all of a sudden, she conjured this ragtime stomp that came out of it, and this old Norwegian lady was just bouncing away, and I sat there absolutely memorized. What was that line again? These are
He said,
enchanted.
yeah, he said, I wake up every morning and I remember that I'm selling enchanted objects. That's the power of this. That's what you did there. I mean, you created magic using an enchanted object. That's what you
That
did
is
with that Steinway
beautiful. I
commercial. I can
I
take no
love that
credit for
line.
any of this, Park. I can take no credit for any of this. It's my
I
near encyclopedic memory.
That's that history major
Yeah,
in you.
maybe.
It's not what you make, but what you make happen.
Yeah,
You may
yeah.
make and sell a Steinway, but you are selling an enchanted object. All it is doing is waiting for you to sit down and summon the music out of it. That's freaking brilliant. I
Summon,
love that.
summon. That's a great word. Yeah,
I
absolutely,
love that. Well,
absolutely.
Zach, thank you for being here. Where can people learn more about you, about Namm? Where can they download your album, The Wine of Youth?
You can download it from Spotify, or pardon me, stream it there. It's on Tidal as well and Apple Music. You can go to my website, zachphillips.com. NAM, by all means, explore what we do. I think we're just an incredible organization. NAM.org, NAMM.org. Let's hope that I'm going to just put it out there that after this pandemic, we're going to see some innovation like we haven't seen in our lifetime. That's that's what that's what I'm expecting now.
You're going to see and hear. I mean, you're Nam after all.
We're gonna have, you're seeing it now. 2021's been a great year for music. Lot of hardship, translated into song, which makes some beautiful art.
No doubt about it. Zach, thank you so much for being here. I got one last question for you.
Yes,
Just
sir.
hit me. What is your favorite music documentary?
Oh, wow. Great question. I think U2 Rattle and Hum is the single most underrated documentary of all time. It's beautifully filmed, but I'm going to go with a very unflattering portrait of my favorite artist of all time, and that would be "Don't Look Back," the documentary about Bob Dylan on his, I think it was May 1965 tour of Europe. Not a flattering portrait of Dylan, but you get to see a portrait of a young artist, smack dab in the middle of his mythic prime and the way his mind works, and it's electrifying. There's no other term for it. So don't look back.
Those are two documentaries I have not seen. So thank you for that. I'm putting them on my Netflix list.
You're so
Um,
welcome. Can't
if
go
I
wrong with
can
them.
if I can share mine, it's The
Please.
Wrecking Crew. Have you seen The
Oh,
Wrecking Crew?
man.
That I just absolutely love that
All right,
that
Park.
doc.
I'm gonna overstay my welcome. Not only have I seen The Wrecking Crew, we had a bunch of art, a bunch of folks who were still living when they were still living, and that movie came out. Participate in a panel discussion at the Namm Show when that movie came out, and it was
Oh
organized by
man.
by the filmmaker. Yep, pretty
You
cool.
have a recording of that?
We don't. We don't. I
Wow.
don't think we have it. It was 2010, I want to say. Early days of filming everything.
It was pre-Zach is what it was. If you were there, you would have had it, right?
I sure would hope so. Yeah, it was pretty cool. What a great film,
Yeah.
though.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, good
Really
choice.
amazing. Well, dude, thank you so much for being here. I know you got a ton on your plate, and I just really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your musicality with our listeners today.
Best part of my week. Thank you for having me, Park. This is incredible.
Hey, and thank you for listening to this edition of the Business of Story. You know what to do. If you like what you heard, share it. Share it around. If you don't know about Namm and it's something that you think that you could take advantage of, definitely get over. We'll have all the links in the show notes where you can stream Zach's new album. Check it out. If I can be of service to you, come on over to the Business of Story. I'm here to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And you can bet I'm going to swipe that these are enchanted objects. That is brilliant. A great example of it's not what you make, but what you make happen in your customer's life. Until next week, when we will have another enchanting guest here for you, like Zach, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is a story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening. And Zach, here's that commercial I promised you.
Imagine how much fun Bach would have had with a Kawai digital piano. Or Mozart. He would have been silly over it. You see, Kawai has expanded man's creativity with its new digital pianos, available at Allen Piano. Now enjoy the sound and touch of a concert grand. With 9 other instruments at your fingertips, like an electric piano, a full church organ, or even vibes to play around with. And Kawai digital pianos are priced surprisingly less than a standard piano, from only $13.95. And that includes headphones for privacy and computer plugins for even more musical variety. So now, when the musical genius in your family sits down to Haydn, they can add a personal touch. The Kawai digital piano, simply changing the history of music.